Good evening and welcome to the English News Bulletin here on Rwanda Television. We believe that you started the week well. Let's begin with the top stories of the day. Regional political diplomatic analysts believe that a joint EAC-SADC summit could be one of the possible ways to achieve a lasting solution to the insecurity issues in the Eastern DRC. The National Council for Persons with Disabilities calls on grant recipients with disabilities to utilize the funds effectively to enhance their development and well-being. On the international scene, the recent outbreak of the H5N1 avian influenza virus in the US and the potential for it to mutate has raised concerns among the scientific community. My name is Olive and it's a great pleasure to have you with us for today's edition. Let's kick off the edition. Regional political and diplomatic analysts believe that a joint EAC-SADC summit could be one of the possible ways to achieve a lasting solution to the insecurity issues in the Eastern DRC. However, they emphasize that this approach must be accompanied by strong political will from the DRC government to address the root causes of the crisis. Adam Skizera kicks us off tonight.
The fall of Goma to the M23 rebel group has triggered a series of high-level summits involving regional blocs such as the East African Community EAC and the Southern African Development Community SADC. This gathering aimed at finding solution to the ongoing crisis in the Eastern DRC as the situation continues to draw international attention. The East African Community was the first to call for a joint EAC-SADC summit to address the escalating crisis in the Eastern DRC. This proposal was later endorsed by SADC. Dr. Charles Murigande, an expert in politics and diplomacy, believes that the summit could offer a viable solution to the crisis in the Eastern DRC. However, he emphasizes that for the talks to be effective, they must be driven by the genuine political will of all parties directly involved in the conflict.
If this root cause was understood well, I don't think any country in the whole of Eastern Congo, the whole of Southern Africa, or the whole of Africa, even in the world, would side with Tshisekedi when Tshisekedi says he can only entertain a total military victory against its own population. Don't see President Tshisekedi saying to all these presidents from EAC and SADC point blank that he will never negotiate if all of them are telling them that we are no longer ready to die for you. We won't fight for you. We won't help you to fight and exterminate a part of your population. Therefore, we are asking you to sit down and negotiate. If you don't want to do that, we are going to withdraw, let you deal with the issue until you solve it. That position would lead to the launch of negotiations, and the issue is as simple as I explained, can find a solution.
However, analysts argue that SADC has shown bias in its approach to the conflict, particularly after accusing the Rwanda Defense Force in its statement following the extraordinary summit. The Rwandan government firmly rejected these accusations. This aligns with the stance of certain SADC member states, including South Africa, which has been criticized for displaying hypocrisy in handling the issue. Senator Evode Uwizeyimana finds that such approaches only exacerbates the problem rather than contributing to a lasting solution. You can see they are playing a double game. How does South Africa, as part of SADC, emphasize diplomatic processes and then deploy troops in the Eastern DRC for an offensive mission? This was precisely the issue that led the withdrawal of the aircraft. It was meant to be a neutral force, not an offensive one. That's why I'm saying there is no military solution could be in this issue. Even President Kagame retaliated without political will from DRC, there cannot be resolution at all. If the concerned parties fail to take ownership of the issue, we may reach at a point where Tshisekedi insists on fighting, while the regional blocs step back and let him face the consequences. At that stage, M23 could advance all the way to Kinshasa. President Felix Tshisekedi's absence at the 24th Extraordinary Summit of the East African Community Heads of State raised concerns about commitment to a regional solution for the crisis in the Eastern DRC. During the summit, President Paul Kagame expressed concerns about the effectiveness of the ongoing process.
By the way, even now the person or the country we are talking about is not represented as we are discussing. And it is supposed to be, the country is supposed to be part of East Africa, but nowhere to be represented. So I'm not sure what bearing what we are discussing has on what happens in the process of finding a solution in this country.
Rwanda has consistently advocated for a political solution to the ongoing conflict and welcomes the proposed joint summit of the East African Community EAC and SADC. Adam Squizera, RwandaTV News.
Thank you, Adams, for the details. Still on regional security matters, political experts, including those who have closely followed the history of insecurity in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, argue that the crisis has deep roots in colonial history. They believe that the military approach chosen by the Congolese government will not yield results, as they are fighting against their own citizens who have nowhere else to go. Serge Honore unpacks the story.
For over 60 years, the residents of the Eastern DRC have faced various challenges, including massacres that have forced many to flee to neighboring countries. The late Tanzanian President Julius Nyerere once spoke about the issue of Kinyarwanda-speaking communities in the Eastern DRC.
So when we say respect that border, which was agreed between the Germans and the Belgians, we must also be saying respect the people whom you received under that petition. You can't turn around and say, we no longer want you. You are no longer citizens of our country. What are you going to do? Are you going to return them alone, or you return them with the piece of land? You can't say go home. Home where?
Former South African President Thabo Mbeki has also emphasized that the continuous wars in the Eastern DRC are deeply rooted in history and that the government in that country continues to ignore the truth.
Is that there's a problem in the Congo which has not been resolved up to today. I'm talking about the DRC. As you know, part of the population in the Eastern Congo is Rwanda speaking, the Banyamulenge. Part of the problem in the Congo is that they might be Rwanda speaking, but these are Congolese. And it's the responsibility of any government in Kinshasa to look after this section of the Congolese population like any other.
The current situation, analysts say, is a consequence of decisions made by the President of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Felix Tshisekedi. Political analyst Andrew Mwenda explains.
The current situation in the Eastern DRC is a direct result of the failure of President Felix Tshisekedi of the Congo to implement a series of peace agreements and commitments he has personally signed, A, with M23, B, with the East African Community, C, Congo had already signed with the ICGRC, that is the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region, and of course, the decisions made through the Rwanda process, where Rwanda and Congo have been in negotiations using the good offices Lorenco Angola. Now, the M23 have been looking for a way to have a peace agreement they signed with the government of Tshisekedi implemented. Tshisekedi has said he will not talk to them and he will seek a military solution to this conflict. Now, in pursuit of that military solution is where we are at. So had he agreed with the South African leaders, the leaders of the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region, or with President Lourenco of Angola to have a peaceful process through which this matter could be resolved, there would be no war in Eastern DRC.
Kenyan activist and lawyer Patrick Otieno Lumumba argues that the only solution to the crisis in the Eastern DRC is dialogue with the M23 rebel group.
The argument, for example, that comes from the Kinshasa administration that they cannot have a face-to-face meeting with M23 is without merit, because it is the M23 who are on the ground, and they are an organized force with a clear chain of command.
Political experts agree that negotiations between the Congolese government and M23 are the only viable path to a lasting solution to the insecurity in the Eastern DRC.
Thank you, Serge, for a detailed report. Now, moving ahead, residents and travelers using border crossings between Rwanda and Uganda in Nyagatare district affirmed their commitment to adhering to all measures aimed at preventing and containing the recent Ebola outbreak in the neighboring Uganda. In addition to border points, local authorities have also called on those working in crowded areas to reinforce preventive measures against the disease. We have a detailed report. At the Kagitumba border, one of the busiest crossings in the region and largest, every traveler is screened for fever before being allowed to proceed. They are also required to wash their hands with clean water and soap or use hand sanitizer. Additionally, travelers are asked whether they have recently visited Kampala, where an Ebola outbreak was reported in the recent days. Those crossing the border from both countries acknowledge the importance of these measures and recognize their responsibility in ensuring compliance. Testing is very important and necessary, as someone may contract the disease unknowingly. Undergoing a test helps determine your current health status, and if needed, you may be placed in quarantine to prevent the spread of the disease to others. On the other hand, some individuals remain unaware of this information, including those in the country where the Ebola outbreak was first detected. At the end of January, Uganda's Ministry of Health announced a resurgence of Ebola, which claimed the life of the first patient who was receiving treatment at Mulago Hospital in the capital of Kampala. In addition to fever screening and hand-washing protocols, all travelers crossing the border must first present their identification documents, as explained by Dr. Muragizi John, a physician stationed at the Kagitumba border. Every resident coming from the other side leave their basic info, such as their name, destination, phone number, and other relevant details. This information is essential for monitoring them over 21 days, as they may pass through without showing any symptoms, which could appear later. Keeping their details allows us to follow up and ensure proper monitoring. In collaboration with health authorities, a training exercise was recently conducted at the Kagitumba border and Nyagatare Hospital to assess the response to a suspected Ebola case, including reception, evaluation, and care. The Nyagatare District Administration states that preventive measures have been implemented at all border points within the district, including Gwemasha and Wuziwa. However, they emphasize that these measures should also be enforced in all public gathering places, as highlighted by Juliet Murekatete, the district deputy mayor in charge of community welfare. Crowded areas include schools, where we have advised staff to remind students to wash their hands before entering. We have also shared this message at markets, bus stops, and other public spaces. Additionally, we urge people to continue providing services while strictly observing preventive measures to help prevent the epidemic from entering the country through our district. This is not the first Ebola outbreak in Uganda. The disease last emerged in late 2022, claiming 55 lives. Ebola is characterized by symptoms such as bleeding from mucous membranes, such as mouth, nose, and others. Symptoms also include severe headaches, vomiting, and muscle pain. Health authorities emphasize that the virus primarily spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids from an infected person. Now to more news. The National Council for Persons with Disabilities has called on grant recipients to utilize the funds effectively to enhance their development and well-being. We have details. In a three-day meeting which brings together 17 organizations supported by the Disability Rights Fund, government agencies, and various stakeholders is focused on exploring ways to continue providing effective and comprehensive support to people with disabilities. Aimable Idihose, Executive Director of the Rwanda Organization of People with Physical Disabilities and Wheelchair Users, acknowledges that the support they have received has been beneficial, but emphasizes that there are still challenges that need to be addressed.
For us, our organization is working with Article 9 of UNCRPD, which is accessibility, and this accessibility is like a cross-cutting issue because persons still we are representing are still facing the challenge to have those ortheses and the prostheses, even those wheelchairs, due to their expensiveness, while their potential are still limited. So we cannot state the number right now, but the budget is just raised to up to 15 million Rwandan francs. But still, we are just thanking the government of Rwanda for having recognized us that even though we cannot finding them right now, but the health insurance that's used by all the Rwandans should support them since some months to come.
François Xavier Karangwa, the Executive Director of UPHLS, a non-governmental organization advocating for people with disabilities, also notes that the support provided varies significantly across different categories of disability.
This Disability Rights Fund funds are provided to around 17 organizations of persons with disabilities, which are grouped in different interventions, including some of them in the health sector, others in education sector, others in economic empowerment sector, others in disaster management sector, even others are working on infrastructure. And the aim of this funding is to advocate for service change by providing key models that other partners can follow and making like accessibility in terms of infrastructure, in terms of services, even the capacity building or the capacity empowerment of beneficiaries who are persons with disabilities, and some other key partners who are partnering with the persons with disabilities in Rwanda.
Emmanuel Ndaisawa, Executive Secretary of the National Council of Persons with Disabilities, urges grant recipients to utilize the funds efficiently for their intended purpose.
We advise to our colleagues of civil society organizations, this means the organization persons with disabilities, to make sure they all support they receive from our partners, our different partners, is well used to promote, in order to promote the rights of persons with disabilities.
Since its establishment in Rwanda in 2013, the Disability Rights Fund has supported 26 families of individuals with disabilities, with each family receiving an annual grant of $935,000. Tomorrow news, residents and users of the Chishiro-Bugesera Road wish for additional bus stops as the available ones are insufficient. The city of Kigali affirms that their requests will be considered and new lanes will be added where necessary. Prince Manzi has more on this.
Chishiro-Bugesera Road residents and users point out that the distance between the bus stops is too long, hence in need of new bus stops.
kuva ku mashuri ukaza ukagomba kuza guhagarara igahanga ufuye muri nini ni ikibazo.
From the schools in Murinini and come to wait in Gahanga, it is a long journey, or from Kanogo to Mugendo, there should be another stop. There should be bus stops because there are few. Additional bus stops are needed, if necessary modern ones that are covered, protecting passengers from the sun. Emma Claudine Nirenganya, the Director General in charge of Communication and Education in the city of Kigali, affirms that the issue will be discussed with relevant authorities for an effective response.
navuga rero ngo kuri kiriya gice kiva Gahanga kigana ku kiraro usanga ari ahantu.
I can say that this region from Gahanga towards Bugesera, it was less populated, especially closer to the asphalt road, but when it is necessary to add bus stops, it is done through assessments and citizen ideas. We can assure them that those in charge will take an effective response of adding some if necessary.
The population along the Nyanza-Kicukiro road, especially in Gahanga, has been growing steadily since the road was constructed. As a result, they find that the bus stops that were initially placed when the area was less populated are no longer sufficient.
Hello, utekereza ko guhora wivuganya n'umushu aribyo birenze? Natwe niko tubibona. Ubona nta cyakurutira kugaragaza impano yawe, niko bimeze.
So guys, uyu munsi tugiye kuganira tugaseke. Agaseke njye gafite byinshi. Kamari, ese wowe kakumariye iki? Manudi. Halo Manudi, niba iki uri kunkura mu kazi? Hero mabuja, byahiye kandi noneho bimeze neza cyane. Umva ukuntu biri no guhumura. Ako Manudi, urumva nakumva ko ibiryo bihumura koko?
Ubona nta cyakurutura umwuga wawe. Erega, natwe niko tubibona. Dushyigikiye buri kimwe agaciro mu buzima bwawe na irekure nshya. Buri wese arahishiwe, wikwisondeka. Kanda akanyenyeri 150 urwego, uhitemo agaseke kawe ka packs zo guhamagara. Cyangwa akanyenyeri 345 urwego, uhitemo bando za internet uryoherwe n'umuvuduko wa 4G.
Welcome back now to matters making headlines globally. The recent outbreak of the H5N1 avian influenza virus in the United States and the potential for it to mutate has raised concerns among the scientific community that it could result in human-to-human transmission and a new pandemic. Farmers are also concerned. VOA has the details.
Feeding time.
George Terwilliger runs Pleasant Vale Farm in Delaplane, Virginia, west of Washington. He has modified his small-scale operation due to the H5N1 avian influenza virus. The so-called bird flu has resulted in not only a high U.S. bird mortality since 2022, but also a sharp increase in the price of eggs nationwide.
We here on this farm have not expanded our chickens over the last year or two out of fear that we might inadvertently bring birds in that are infected.
Terwilliger, a member of the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources Board, is also concerned about the risk bird flu could pose to his hogs and to about 100 cows and calves that he owns.
If the disease were to get to the point where it infects cattle and makes them sick or makes their meat, these are beef cattle, makes their meat unacceptable, that would put us out of business.
Bird flu in dairy cows was first reported in late March. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says the public health risk remains low, with just 67 confirmed infections from animals to humans and 1 death. Constant changes in the genome of the virus, however, have some scientists worried.
If there are changes that make it more possible for the virus to transmit from person to person, which so far we haven't seen, then that could be a real challenge in terms of our public health response, and is the reason that we think of this virus as having pandemic potential.
People can minimize the risk of infection, Davis added.
Avoiding contact with sick or dead wild animals is probably the most important thing to do. We know that pasteurization of milk, cooking of meat to the recommended temperatures, and cooking of eggs are effective to really inactivate this particular virus.
Pet owners are advised to monitor recalls of contaminated pet food and raw milk and to keep their pets away from contact with wild birds. As he keeps a watchful eye on the latest developments, Terwilliger is planning ahead.
Typically, sometime a month or so from now, we would buy turkey poults to raise turkeys for commercial sale at Thanksgiving. I'm not sure we'll do that this year because I would be concerned about where I get the birds from. Will they come with avian flu?
In the meantime, he says he'll follow the science and hopes that the disease runs its course, all while keeping a very close eye on his livestock. Veronica Valderas Iglesias, VOA News, Delaplane, Virginia.
And this story brings us to the end of tonight's bulletin, but before we leave, a reminder of the top stories that made the edition. Regional political and diplomatic analysts believe that a joint EAC-SADC summit could be one of the possible ways to achieve a lasting solution to the insecurity issues in the Eastern DRC. The National Council for Persons with Disabilities calls on grant recipients to utilize their funds effectively to enhance their development and well-being. On the international scene, the recent outbreak of the H5N1 avian influenza virus in the US and the potential for it to mutate has raised concerns among the scientific community. And that concludes today's bulletin. On behalf of the entire news team, we wish you a productive and fruitful week ahead. Take care and goodbye.